Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Constance Wrigley-Thomas and I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Institute of Food Science and Technology. And on behalf of CIFST and Food in Canada, Canada's only national and beverage processing magazine, welcome to Table Talks, where we bring you regular webinars that give you access to some of the leaders in the food and beverage industry. If you haven't already, please visit the CIFST website for a list of upcoming webinars, which will continue weekly into July. If you are a member of CIFST, registration for the entire webinar series is free. Today's topic is rethinking food and ingredient innovation pipelines after COVID-19. Before we kick off today's session, I want to mention that if you have any questions, you can write them in the question box, and I will moderate the questions at the end of the webinar, and our speaker will try to answer them before the end. So I'd now like to introduce our speaker. Dana McCauley has a nose for the new, and throughout her career, she has combined her interest in food and insights on global food trends to bring profitable concepts that fulfill unmet consumer needs to market. As Director of New Venture Creation, Dana's mandate is to enable Canada's smartest agri-food researchers to transform their insights into commercial value. Dana was recognized as Canada's most powerful woman, Top 100 award winner in 2017, an honor celebrating female leaders who inspire others. I should mention that in lieu of a speaker's fee, we will be making a donation in Dana's name to The Seed. The Seed is a not-for-profit food project at the Guelph Community Health Center that was created in 2015 by a coalition of community organizations and individuals. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dana McCauley.
Thank you, Constance. Yeah, I'm really chuffed to be here to put a point on it. I am going to share some thoughts and predictions with you today. Hopefully they will resonate with your business and help you to use your resources wisely as you try to navigate your food or ingredient business out of this very strange COVID-19 setback. I'm going to move quite quickly because I do want to have an opportunity to answer your questions. And if we don't get to a question and you do want to follow up with me later one-on-one, you can contact me through all the normal various channels. So, how is COVID-19 affecting innovation? Here's two articles that I found recently talking about how big companies like Kellogg and Coca-Cola are trying to mitigate the effects of making good decisions right now. In the one case, you see that product launches are being pushed back, and in the other that they're doing smaller projects. And of course, we all know that innovation dollars that don't lead to saleable products, of course, are wasted dollars, so it makes perfect sense. I included this slide as just a little reference point. For those of you who know Matson, they're a product development company out of California. They do work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses and some big businesses, and they did a survey recently. So I do think that they came up with some interesting things about how as a temperature check, they came up with some interesting insights about how businesses who are in the product business are looking at their pipeline. I was surprised to see that that there was so much division, and I think that's maybe why so many of you signed up for today's webinar. I think people who are normally very confident in their recommendations and their insights, we're all second guessing ourselves right now because we really haven't been in this situation, and it is difficult to find a firm piece of ground when everything's shifting. So I'm going to just take a step back and say, March 1st, if you'd asked me what was on trend, what would I have told you? And I would have said, well, plant-based, and of course all these other things were what journalists were reaching out to talk to me about, what small businesses and even large businesses were asking me for opinions about. Now, of course, we're seeing quite a different landscape. And surprisingly, you know, we have takeout, but it's different than it used to be. We see lots of people cooking at home, snacking is surging. Despite the fact there's still some people, including some, at least one I know of who's on this webinar, who are still interested in keto and low carb and gluten-free eating, there is this massive push to make comfort food and to have a sourdough starter baby in your house to nurture and love. So how much of that's going to stick? That's the question, right? That's on everybody's mind. Do we throw away those categories and imagine that we're going to have a totally different landscape? In the appendix, I've put a bunch of links to articles that I've been reading and that I found valuable, both for developing this webinar and for developing other insights that I've needed for my job at the university and for my clients through Blue Unicorn. One that I saw today that was very interesting was a CBC article, and a Canadian Grocer article, where they spoke to the CFO of Vince's Markets, and he mentioned that, you know, there's tons of root vegetables and lots of ingredients, and ready meals aren't selling. Well, I'd say that that's because people are at home and they're not racing around to evening activities from work, and they're taking the opportunity to cook. Once lockdown eases up and we do get busy again, I think that that will change, but that seems like it's going to be quite a ways off. So what do we do in the meantime? I don't think it's any secret that a lot of people are very worried about the economy, both the general economy of Canada, as well as their personal economies. So I think if you have been working on items for the super premium and premium markets, you probably want to explore more value-focused versions of those items, regardless of what the category is. I believe that we're going to see a lot fewer people splurging in the next 2 to 5 years. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of information about how I've identified this new value consumer. In the past, we saw that millennials were everybody's favorite target market to talk about, and you know, they were sorry, I'm having a couple of little weird pop-ups here. Sorry about that. I was distracted for a moment. Before COVID, we saw that millennials were, you know, taking on debt. They were in the gig economy, but they were trying to buy houses and cars and all of those kinds of things. They will, you know, have a lot more debt. They already came into this being gig workers in a lot of cases and having student debt that people from the Gen X generation that I'm part of didn't have. And you're going to see their behaviors a little different. Instead of, you know, spending their time making a croquembouche on Saturday, I think they might be making freezer meals. So that's an insight that is, I think, very important. So let me see here. Got to get my mouse working. Sorry, folks. This there we go. Now I'm moving too far ahead. So I have been struggling with what to call the cohort that comes after the millennials. Conventionally, they're being called Generation Z. But I made this slide because it made me think about what their lives have been like. So if you were born in 1900, so, you know, most of us have grandparents who were born between 1900 and probably, you know, 1940s, you would have had a life that had a lot of uncertainty and a lot of disruption in it. And that really tailored those people's behavior as consumers. They washed plastic bags, they you know, used every little bit of a heel of cheese, you know, nothing went into the garbage. And I would say that this current cohort is a little bit similar. If you were born in the year 2000, you were around for the 9/11 attacks. And as you know, many Gen Zs were born in actually the late 90s. You, were through SARS. In fact, I saw, for those of you who follow pastry chefs, Joanne Yawlis is a dear and longtime friend of mine, and her Instagram, she put up a picture of a beautiful birthday cake the other day, and she was dropping it off for her niece, who is obviously quite a humorous young woman at 17, who said that, yeah, I was born in the years of SARS, and I'm, coming of age in COVID. So just think about that. How does that affect your outlook on life? I think it means that you are a very different person than a millennial. And in fact, I've decided to call this group Generation C for crisis. Here's just some basic information about this next cohort that's coming into the marketplace. They like to cook. They are debt averse because they saw their parents go through the 2008 recession. They're very skeptical of flowery brand stories. They want cool and interesting things, but they don't necessarily have to be expensive. And they're very willing to try different cuisines, but they want everything to come to them because they are digital natives. They have always had email. They probably had a smartphone from the time that they were 9 or 10, or at least a cell phone if smartphones weren't available. This picture of this man, he's a French Canadian who wrote a book, which if your French is good, you will see that it's about how to cook and eat from dollar store foods. And he had quite a bit of momentum going in the media, even the English media, considering that his book is not translated into English. So we've saw before March 1st that dollar stores were growing. And I think we'll continue to see that. I also think that Canadian stores will, like the US stores who've set the trend, will start to add freezers and refrigerated goods. Giant Tiger is a really interesting retailer to watch. They very strategically have started to snap up real estate where Targets used to be, not using the whole space because their insight is that their consumer wants to get in and out and have a wide variety of products very, very easily and quickly at hand because she's a very busy shopper. So if you see the quotation marks there, that's taken right from Giant Tiger's website. So I do think that you'll see more people going to dollar stores and Giant Tiger and looking for value. Anecdotally, my local plaza has a Foodland, which is a Sobeys banner, right next door to a Giant Tiger. They're similar size footprints. The Foodland is maybe 20% bigger than the Giant Tiger. I have been able to go to Foodland and walk in all through this crisis. Giant Tiger always has a lineup where they have to control the number of people they're letting into the store. So what's the future of convenience and who's going to use it? I think we're going to see the Amazon Go concept, which is touchless, become much more attractive to people who are not wanting to interface with cashiers and handle money and cards and that kind of thing. And I also think this local concept, Popbox, which is a Toronto store, which again has that small footprint. They've got good coffee, they have a lot of local products and ready to take and heat and eat foods. I think will be the kinds of retailers who are going to see some growth, and they'll need new products to differentiate themselves from one another. So if you want to appeal to the value consumer, I think you're going to want to have claims and marketing materials that emphasize premium callouts. You definitely have to deliver true value. It can't be, an overpromise. You're definitely going to want to talk about product quality and ingredients and make sure that people feel confident about where your supply chain originates and how your products are made. For that Gen C consumer and others, I think, you know, if you can offer customization, that's probably a really interesting way to get people to buy volume. You know, household penetration is great, but it's always ideal to get someone to buy 3 or 4 of what you sell. So if you give usage suggestions and that kind of thing on your packaging and in your marketing materials, wherever possible, I think that will be very, very useful. Now, beyond value, I think the other big driver for consumers going forward is going to be the new clean. So a lot of dietitians, for instance, are very uncomfortable with that term clean eating because it is not, you know, defined and regulated. But I think we can all agree that clean has had a meaning in the past that was really about ingredients. I would say that clean is going to expand now to include traceability and production insights, as well as you know, extending all the way through to the purchase process, and maybe in some cases even you know, the last mile home. So this is what the clean eating environment looked like before COVID. You had the clean eating brand driving it to a large extent, and you saw, you know, some companies pulling out call outs that had to do with clean, either in their brand, as in the case of the greens, or in the you know, the names of the varieties themselves. I think that's going to evolve. So here's a little bit about what clean food in the age of COVID is starting to look like. You see, of course, signs about curbside pickup. I think this tamper-proof pizza box, Pizza Pizza is not the only company who is doing that. I've seen Domino's and other takeout brands starting to put this tamper-proof, sealed for security as opposed to sealed for freshness, which is what we used to see on their takeout packaging. And I think that we will probably see that moving into the deli and fresh meal area of grocery stores, and potentially into products that are, you know, sold in quick serve, you know, grab and go convenience, that kind of thing. Those would be the first places. You can also see, though, by those pictures of the manufacturing environments I'm sharing with you, that physical distancing means that we need a lot more space in our production facilities, and we have to spend money on new items like plexiglass and enhanced PPE for the people working in all kinds of manufacturing, whether it's meat or otherwise. And of course, that all needs extra sanitation and cleaning. So being clean, whether you're a retailer or a manufacturer or a food company of any kind, is going to cost you more money, which is going to eat into your margins. So this is the sort of double pressure. You're going to have more expenses, but a value consumer, which is going to make it, I think, very difficult to you know, have the growth in your brands and the contribution margin that you probably are always striving for. Traceability is a big part of this clean thing that I'm proposing will be attractive to consumers. This was a product featured in Canadian Grocers magazine newsletter thing earlier this week. And I think it's interesting because I've heard people talk about doing this in the past, and I think more people will start investing in it. It means that when you're manufacturing, you're going to have very controlled batches. So for instance, I think we all know that the, you know, average hamburger that we buy in the you know, frozen box meat section at the store is made up of many animals' carcasses. You know, ground meat is just where all the scraps go. If a burger company wanted to use this kind of traceability, they would have to use just one type of beef that was processed on one particular day in one particular shift. So you can see where this adds a lot of complexity in managing your supplies. If you need, to use a home example that you can of course extrapolate to your business, if you just need an extra teaspoon of vanilla and you have to open a jar that's a different brand, all of a sudden that kind of traceability is no longer possible in a baked good. So again, something consumers will be interested in, but that product developers and innovators need to understand the impact of on their business and their bottom line before they take the leap. So I took an opportunity to have a little sip of water to give you an opportunity to read this slide. These are 5 ways that I would recommend that innovators and R&D teams sit down and talk about how they can communicate clean. Not all of it is going to cost money. Product name, you're going to name your product regardless. So if you were going to call something, the super premium Googleophonic best ever, maybe now is the time to go for something a little different if you haven't already invested in your packaging for this new launch. QR codes are becoming remarkably used. They languished for a while, but most smartphones, the Apple and the Samsung for sure, have QR codes that you can swipe open. The same way you can swipe open your camera or your flashlight at a moment's notice. And through the work I do with the 4th year product development students at the University of Guelph in the food science department, I was really surprised to see how many of those students who are generally in their early 20s, how many of them were using QR codes in their projects and were very familiar with them and liked that technology. This is not the time to launch a product with a secret formula. Of course, you'll have your trade secrets, but I think you want to be as transparent as possible. And if you're doing anything that involves new technology, new science, anything that could make consumers uneasy. So for instance, if you're in the plant-based protein world where you're using fermentation and other types of new tools to get textures and tastes that consumers like, you probably want to explain it in very clear, jargon-free ways, maybe with some videos and things like that. And that can extend, of course, to your social. And now's the time to have a really good fact section on your, and by fact, I mean FAQ, frequently asked questions, on your website. Clean is leadership, and I think most people on this call will, if they didn't see it firsthand, they will have read case studies about how Michael McCain handled the listeria outbreak at Maple Leaf a number of years ago. And he made food safety a really important pillar for that company going forward and really showed leadership. And I think clean is an opportunity for folks in the industry right now to embrace and to let consumers know that it's a priority. So there's groups that you can join. Canadian Institute for Food Safety is just one of them. You can certainly create a food and health safety advisory board with people from industry and, as I say, from former employees of places like Health Canada and that kind of thing. I also added, a place at the top of this slide where I highlight some of the people I work with, who I go to for leadership in this idea of food safety, food quality, and general sort of cleanliness guidelines. One, Dr. Larry Goodridge will be doing one of these webinars in the near future, potentially next week. I'm not sure. We'll plug him at the end. And then the others are all folks that you'll recognize from the media if you follow this space. And I've put their Twitter handles there, so you can follow them if you like. But as I say, these are the people that I go to get the leading edge information that I need to have to do things like this. In fact, I've spoken to Dr. Goodrich and Dr. Warner and Dr. Van Mossow several times during the last few weeks, and have really benefited from their insight. So packaging, I mentioned that you can use your name of your product to connote cleanliness, as those greens in the slide I showed a few moments ago showed. But I love this picture because, of course, it's fresh green lettuce and the water. It's just lightening things up and making your packaging look, I think rustic is out in packaging, to be perfectly honest, for the next little while. So you want to just do anything you can working with your design team, whether they're internal or whether you hire them out, to not only differentiate yourself on shelf, as you always want to do, but also how can you, if you're making claims about cleanliness, really show that with your visuals. So now I'm going to make a segue a little bit and talk a little bit about how manufacturers of ingredients and products can think about their customer, who's generally a retailer or a distributor or another B2B connection you have, and your consumers, because they're obviously both important groups to understand. So today's grocery shopper is everyone. We have 4 generations of people in the grocery store environment, and they all want slightly different things. So the baby boomers, they are all very concerned about their health now, because most of them are over 60, and so they want delivery, they want pickup, they want touchless. Gen X is we always get lumped in with the boomers, but we're a little different. We want same day click and collect. We're more comfortable with technology. So if we're your target market, which we hardly ever are, that's what you need to know about us. Millennials want Instapot ready meal kits. There's a new company out of California I just learned about last night called SETA, S-E-E-T-A, which has started doing Indian meals ready to go into Instapots. They also they're missing restaurants terribly. The millennials were heavy users of all kinds of food service, and so restaurant quality heat needs important, and many of them are at home with kids, so they want things with broad appeal. Gen Z, they're very comfortable ordering online. They all want coupons, they want delivery, but they aren't necessarily going to be happy with same day click and collect. They want things to happen even faster. So if there are ways for you to develop new ways of delivering your products to them, or you can help, if you're an ingredient company, your partners to find those ways, I think new types of vending will be helpful. And I can see a lot of restaurants turning their excess space that will no longer have tables into places where people can buy products as well. And that's already happening, but I think it will become like a mainstream thing. So, of course, retailers have 2 objectives. They want to sell more to the people who are in the store, and they want to attract new customers. That's become more challenging because we can't hang out and browse in the store. Grocery shopping used to be one of my favorite things. Now, I'm in and out as quickly as possible. I'm actually thinking of changing to a new store only because I'm so familiar with my regular store that I never think to look down at those goofy arrows on the floor, and I'm in the wrong place all the time, walking the wrong way, and I've got people looking at me like I'm a terrible person. So familiarity in this case is not great. So how are you going to do that? And it's going to come down to the fact that you need to be aware of what you want to buy before you go in. People are shopping with lists more often. When you go into the apps and the websites where you can pre-order your groceries, you don't necessarily notice the new product. So launches are going to be very important. Awareness and marketing at the front end to build awareness and induce trial. is not going to happen anymore with pop-up displays and sampling. So you're really going to need to talk to your retailer, buyer, and your distributor about how you're going to get their customer aware of your product. And that's a big puzzle. And there's probably going to be a lot of really cool ideas come out of that. But you know, just some obviously are things like you know, email blasts and sponsored posts on the social media sites that your consumers use. I imagine that places like Grocery Gateway will expand their sampling programs. For those of you who aren't aware, Grocery Gateway is an Ontario branch, an Ontario delivery grocery service that's a branch of Longo's. And for many years, they've had a really cool program that when you ordered your groceries, they would often send you some free samples, the same way that you know, the big cosmetic company Sephora does, so that you have a chance to try things. So I think programs like that will be a great way to get your product into people's homes where they can experience it. And I'm guessing there'll be a lot more of that happening. Attracting new customers to a store, again, I think you're going to see retailers asking for a lot more exclusivity. So they're going to want to be the only retailer or the only distributor who has your item. And that's going to be difficult when you think about your innovation pipeline, because instead of developing 3 SKUs, you probably will need to develop, you know, slightly different flavors, slightly different formats for different stores. And for those who don't have a brand name that is like really well established, you may consider wanting to start out a couple of different brands, one that you sell into a particular retailer, one that you sell into another, just so that you can have a little more flexibility. Because I do think that attracting new customers is a lot harder when you don't have paper flyers coming through the door. Most of the retailers have shifted to using electronic flyers, which you have a slightly different experience. It's not a push. You know, when I get the paper, I see the flyer, whether I was thinking about flyers or not. Where obviously the electronic ones, they don't hang out on your kitchen table in the same way. The hard part is that I think we have to plan for the worst. As we're seeing in Germany the last couple of days, they, you know, were doing very well with their COVID crisis. They were starting to open things up, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, they've got to flare up again. So I think that will happen in the near future. Unfortunately, we will have this parabola of outbreaks that happen in various regions, and I think that'll interrupt our supply chains. So as you're innovating new products, I think using really novel ingredients that you can only get from one supplier should be, you should go into that choice very carefully and try to have as many suppliers from as many different geographic locations as you can to mitigate any roadblocks you have. Obviously, you're going to need to prevent outbreaks as much as you can, which we've already spoken about being an expense. And you probably want to have, you know, some backup people. If you normally run a really lean team, you might want to do some cross training and that kind of thing as well. And I think you want to have lots of packaging on hand, because again, borders and shipping and all that kind of thing are interrupted by these outbreaks. And as much as I know nobody likes to pay for storage, it's probably a good time to have some of your most popular products, you know, ready to go and in a warehouse. So as I mentioned, I've got some further reading for you. This is a bunch of links that you can dive into if you want to get more insight about some of the things I was talking about, or things that are adjacent to what we've spoken about today. You can also follow me on Twitter. I tweet about a lot of things, not always ones that will interest you if your only interest is innovation. But I do share a lot of articles. I try to curate the things that I found the most interesting on any given day on my Twitter. That's usually in the evening and sometimes first thing in the morning. My Twitter is at Dana McCauley, no spaces, no tenses required. So feel free to follow me if you want to get more of this kind of curation. And then there's just a little slide here at the end that tells you a little bit about me. So just so you know, right now my job is that I run new venture creation at the University of Guelph, which means I help startup companies to come out of our labs so that we can have more impact with our research. But in the past, I ran Food Starter, where we launched 80 products in about a year and a half with 140 different food companies. That was a pretty exciting time. So I know a lot about getting new things to market from that experience. And before that, I was a corporate person working at the VP level, running innovation and R&D teams. And I started out as a chef and a food writer. So there's some information about me, just so you understand where these insights are coming from, and hopefully it'll give you more insight into the types of things that I focus on naturally because of this background. So I'm going to ask Constance whether or not we have questions. And certainly, I'm aware I went through things really fast. So good questions are, can you go back to the slide with whatever was on it and talk more about it? So that's something I'm willing to do as well.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Dana. That was fascinating. Really interesting stuff. And actually, thank you for the I guess a commercial for Lawrence next week. So Dr. Lawrence Goodridge is speaking on our webinar next week, and his topic is COVID-19 and food safety, separating fact from myth. Now, I'm going to encourage everybody, I put out a little message to say if you have a question, you can add it to the question box. I just see one that came up just now, so let me just lean over and I'll read it to you, Dana.
Sure.
Oh, amazing insights, exclamation point, exclamation point. Wondering how curbside pickup is clean food.
So yeah, it's about, so I went through it pretty quickly, but I talked about how, you know, the buying process is going to be part of this new kind of clean. So for instance, I went to the garden center recently, and you know, you drive in, you have a number that, you know, you put down your window and you tell the person with the forklift, I'm number 40 or order number 40. And then I went to get out of my car to open my hatch, and they're like, no, 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 no. We do that for you. We don't want, you know, you touching stuff that we touch. So that is one way that a garden center was adding a cleanliness step to their curbside pickup. So yeah, it's not super obvious, but if you can make your products so, and this is what I'm really feeling vexed about, to be honest, because we were so on the track to reduce packaging, reduce plastic. But I do think multiple layers of packaging are going to become part of that whole delivery process. It's like, okay, you know, the cashier, the delivery person, the curbside person picks up the box or the bag, peels off what they touched, and all of a sudden there's this nice clean layer for you to handle, could become a thing. Maybe not, you know, if we all stick to good hand washing and we don't see this virus mutate. But that's what I was getting at, is that the interaction with cashiers, we're already doing a lot more touchless purchasing, and there's plexiglass between us, and we're wearing masks, and the cashiers are wearing masks. So that's what I was getting at, is that that part of the process is something you can think about as well.
And I'm assuming there aren't any standards for clean right now. And if there aren't, is there an organization that you anticipate would be taking on that leadership role? I mean, you talk about traceability. I think probably GS1 would be involved in that. But like, what about clean?
Yeah, so in traceability, I think GS1, companies like IBM that are big into blockchain, all the stuff that we already all know about. When it comes to clean, I'm guessing we'll probably see something that's independently managed, like, the non-GMO project, or, one of these, these other third party, auditing and standard setting groups come about. Before that happens, there's an opportunity, I think, for retail product producers to put up on their own websites what they are doing in that respect. I got inspiration on a webinar that the Spoon did a while ago, and they had Chef Mark Brandt, who's a Vancouver chef and activist, on, and he was already, I don't know, this was still in March. He had already instilled with his staff that they had to sit down, make eye contact with an HR person who explained their full physical distancing standards for both at work, outside of work, and all their new hygiene practices that they were instilling for the food that they were doing for pickup and delivery, and sign a declaration saying that they pledged to abide by all these rules. And then they also put a little bit of budget towards, if someone was taking transit generally, but had access to a car, they pay for their parking, that kind of thing. And they've made that part of their marketing, and to tell consumers that, hey, we're taking your health seriously, and we are, doing everything possible. Manufacturers can absolutely do the same thing. It's not just for restaurants.
Wow, it's a whole new world. All right, so let's see, what else do we have? Ooh, they're just popping in here. Just bear with me for a second.
No problem, I'll take a break.
Well, okay. All right. Okay, you guys got really busy at the end there. So, all right. Regarding dollar store purchases, many dollar store products originate in China. That is not food. Do you see any consumer changes regarding purchasing made in China products? And how might this, and I think how might this change Giant Tiger, Dollarama product assortment?
Well, you know what? I think anybody who is on social media with, a peer group that includes family and neighbors and such, have seen lots of posts about, how Walmart, which of course really, their real skill is in logistics and purchasing, right? And getting inexpensive things to market in places where they couldn't possibly be made locally for the same kind of price. And dollar stores and Giant Tiger, et cetera, have 100% leveraged that. Yet we see a lot of people, particularly in response to bailout dollars and support programs that the government is initiating, saying, well, keep those dollars in Canada. And you know what? There's a lot of people who are starting to become more conscious of that, whether China is the source or just anywhere that isn't here. So I do think that we will see, if there's often, and it's a bummer because it's a trap marketers fall into all the time. You ask people what they want and they tell you what they want, but then they don't actually follow through on it. So a good example, for instance, is at the end of a normal workday, if I were at my office, one of my colleagues might say to me as I'm walking out the door around 5, hey, Dana, what are you doing tonight? And I'd say, oh, I'm going to go home and put on my exercise clothes, and I'm going to go to yoga, and then I'm going to come home and have a salad. And I would mean it. That's my intention. But then the next morning, if they asked me what I did, I'd be like, yeah, I put on my yoga pants, and I was a bit hungry, so I sat down and I had a sandwich and I watched Jeopardy, and then I drank half a bottle of wine, and I didn't get to exercise at all. So, this is a sad insight into just my little focus group of one. But the fact of the matter is that people intend to do things, but then they can't follow through. And so we'll see, I think, when it comes to big purchases, that people will really try hard. And I do think local is going to be an extremely persuasive, as well as a good persuasive marketing message, as well as a good business decision. Again, keep your supply chain simple and close at hand. But I think price will weigh out over time. And I do think that yeah, for reasons they're conscious of in some cases, and reasons that have to do with budgets and that kind of thing, that will probably, net out with a little more local, but I don't think we'll get rid of imports altogether.
Right. So this is a good question. I'm certainly curious about the answer. Is what do you think about meal kits or the meal kit industry?
Yeah, I expected meal kits to really explode during the lockdown. And a couple of the people who I thought would really embrace them told me they were concerned about them because they're so touched. There's all these little pre-done things, and they are smart people, so they realized that one person probably didn't do all of that preparation, and so they were feeling less comfortable with them. I do think, though, that meal kits will continue to do well. Again, they can follow a lot of the recommendations that I mentioned, about packaging and
Yeah.
assurances and that kind of thing. But I think that we've seen a lot of people at home and not racing around to evening activities and not traveling as much, obviously. So they've been cooking a bit more, and their kids, if they have them, have been in the kitchen with them a bit, especially during homeschooling, because a lot of people seem to have recognized that teaching a child how to, fractions while making a cake is easier than, doing it with a notebook. So I can imagine that when people get busy again, now that they're a little bit hooked on home cooking and probably a little freaked out about going to a restaurant where there are a lot of other people and having less access, because we're going to have less restaurants and they're all going to have, many fewer seats, that I think meal kits will continue to be attractive. But again, the one that I mentioned for the Instapot, I think, that's super smart, because it's a meal kit that also leverages something that people already have in their homes, and that makes it fast and easy for them to use that kit in a way that they already like to cook.
So this is probably a bit of a corollary or follow-up to that question is, has Gen Z learned any cooking skills at home that will affect food trends, and will basic ingredients be more saleable, or do they only want things instantly? So that Generation C you referred to.
Yeah, my crisis generation. Yes, thanks for echoing my term back to me. You're the first group I've used. I think so, and I am going to go to a tiny focus group of 2 people. I am in my bubble with my husband, who is a chef, and me, who's, a chef and a food writer originally. So needless to say, we love to cook. But in our bubble are my son, who's 23, and his girlfriend, who's 21. And they have been trying interesting things. My son, normally having 2 chefs as parents, has not had to cook. And he made curried goat on the weekend. Yeah, exactly. And they made fajitas another night. And so I do think that they are exploring and developing some skills. And if I can extrapolate from that focus group of 2, yeah, I think that because they are, definitely money conscious, that they probably will continue to cook. But I also think it's interesting the types of things they chose. Like, they didn't do a steak and a baked potato and Caesar salad, something I personally love and do frequently. They went for although fajitas, one could argue, are no longer considered very exotic, they have been going for things that have that have some restaurant appeal.
All right, so I'm going to ask one more question before we bring things to a close. So somebody again says, excellent, they're really enjoying your presentation. I'm starting to feel like an intruder in the grocery store rather than a guest.
Right?
Like you, I've been reprimanded for not behaving as expected. There were directions on the floor, blah, blah, blah. So it's becoming stressful ultimately. Is the retail sector aware of this impact on previously loyal in-store, high volume grocery shoppers? So there's a potential crisis and opportunities, I guess, for the retail sector and those stressed out consumers.
Yeah, they have to be aware of it. I haven't spoken to any retailers directly myself. I did mention that that interview with the CFO of Vince's Supermarkets, I think earlier on, I saw earlier on in this webinar that I saw this morning, and definitely his comments were really insightful and showed that they're very aware of those changes. Interestingly, he framed them in a way that surprised me. So they've found that their shrink is way down because they're wrapping croissants, for instance.
Yes.
And so I think when you look at the retailers who've really prioritized experience, and I'm thinking Longo's, who, Anthony Longo always says, that his stores are entertainment, and I've always loved shopping there whenever I have had an opportunity, and because of the beauty of the displays and the breadth of the offering. And you look at the very specialized places like McEwen's in Toronto, in Italy, and cities, all over the world, where it's about, and even many Whole Foods, right, where it's this integration of food service and grocery shopping. It is about wandering around. I think we all hope that we'll get back to that normal kind of shopping. Like, it's funny when I reflect on the things I'm missing. It's, yes, I'm missing a lot of the big special things that I used to do, as a treat. But I'm also missing like those really basic things, like just getting a takeout coffee and walking around, Home Sense or the grocery store, just kind of like looking to see what's there. Not when I even don't want to shop. So I think the person who answered the question and I have a lot in common on that level. And with so many grocery stores being designed to have that impulse buy, the things that are on the end caps and in the special displays, as I said in some of my slides, when you're launching a new product, that was the perfect way to get people to try things. So they have to be thinking about how they're going to cope with that in the short term. But I have a feeling that they're so busy right now, just executing in the way they must, that there's probably some small teams who are working, thinking, 6 months out, 12 months out, 18 months out, and about those pivots. But I actually have to say, I think grocers have done an amazing job. I think it was around the 13th or 14th that my office said we all needed to work from home, and where, the things started to get, really real. And the next week I was in my local No Frills, and they already had a hand washing station up. So I am so impressed by how the grocers have pivoted. But I agree with the person who answered the question. The surprise and delight part of shopping is, wow, it's not there right now, and we won't have farmers markets this summer in my area, and I doubt any other areas will either. And and that's all about, a sensory experience.
Absolutely. Food is a huge part, I think, of life's enjoyment. So definitely missing those experiences. So Dana, again, thank you for delivering today's webinar, and on behalf of CIFST and Food in Canada magazine, we really appreciate your participation. And again, a reminder, we are making a donation in your name to the seed, and thank you very much. And also a reminder of our upcoming webinars. So next week, May 20th, Lawrence Goodridge of University of Guelph, and then May 27th, we have Deanna Zenger of Food Processing HR Council. We also have a few more we're working on right now. We're very excited about announcing those very shortly, so everybody keep an eye on the website. So again, thank you, Dana, and thank you everyone for attending today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.